Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today's video we're going to be selecting our top 5 tech champions in December 2019. These video series will carry over to January 2020, but basically this is kind of like a second part, because the first time I did this series it was in the middle of the year, it was in June, and quite a lot has changed since. And this year we have been blessed with some extremely good champion releases. We have had some champions flop quite spectacularly, but at the same point we have had some absolutely magnificent champions come in the game, and my overall kind of like total standings for the best champions in game definitely have shifted a fair amount. And so there we're gonna go. We're gonna start off this time with tech class, and yeah, so we're gonna pick our 5 favorites. We're gonna start off with spot number 5, and I will give that to Mysterio. So Mysterio is a champion that is fairly heavily overlooked, and I believe a lot of it has to do with the fact that no, he's not one of the best champions released in this year, because this year has been such a phenomenal year. Definitely new additions to the game, so he's quite easy to lose in crowd. Plus the fact that he's relatively new champion to the game simply means that not all that many people have him. At the same time, I do think he has extremely valuable kind of like toolkit, and first and foremost being able to access poison. Even though there are a lot of poison immune opponents in the game, and opponents who can shrug off debuffs and so on and so forth, can still be extremely viable and important and vital kind of like utility kit that you should possess in your roster. And first and foremost because acid wash is fairly present in any kind of like end game scenario. You can see acid wash in 6.2 and 6.3, you can see it in map 7. I have absolutely no doubt that we're going to continue to see this really annoying node throughout the contest in upcoming year or so. And the fact that there aren't that many champions who can basically poison opponents reliably and consistently and easily will also definitely help this dude shine a bit more. At the same point, he's immune to ability, accuracy, modification, so that is a fairly kind of unique small little toolkit that he has tucked in a way as well. And possibly his biggest claim to fame is that passive heal block. The passive heal block definitely can be extremely versatile, especially when you're dealing with champions who can shrug off debuffs, who are maybe debuff immune and things like that, and it's really easy to access that passive heal block as well. Now, I have mentioned quite a bit about my reservations about the character and the things that I do not like about him. The fact that most of his damage is hidden behind a level 3, the fact that it is hard to keep all of his utilities working well, at the same time trying to access all of the damage potential that you might possibly have. So it does kind of occasionally feel that you are being punished by using your utilities, and you have to sacrifice quite a bit of your damage in order to access all of that good stuff. But at the same point, there are definitely many kind of different interesting and intriguing qualities this guy has. He also is a solid defender, and overall I think he's well worth the 5th spot in tech rankings, because he has a purpose built in-game use with that poison, with a passive heal block. That is a lot more than most of the champions in the game have. That even though he might not be the widest or most popular used champion, I think the qualities that he brings to the table are definitely worth mentioning and keeping an eye out for. Overall, there are definitely better champions in the game released this year, but still at the same time, I do not want to say that he was a disappointment. He was a really kind of like solid, balanced addition to the game, and I think currently, unfortunately, it's kind of well enough to rank him in my top 5 tech spots, because tech class, with a couple of exceptions, obviously, that are going to be on top of this list, really aren't the strongest class all in all, in my opinion. There are a really large amount of a bit of dud champions, if you will. There are quite a bit of memes, and possibly if it was any other class, Mysterio wouldn't make it, but in tech class I think he just kind of managed to crawl his way into top 5, and yeah, I think he's a solid addition that came in this year, definitely. Now in spot number 4 we're going to be taking a look at I just need to resort this a bit more. Guillotine 2099. Now, Guillotine 2099 obviously arrived in contest as a really super hyped champion with her incredible damage output, and that all is still there. Unfortunately, there is no single in-game content currently where we can actually see her in like a top form, and that also kind of like brings her value down in my eyes, because I cannot rate a champion for potential in future that may or may not come. I need to look at how viable, useful, and used these champions are currently in today's kind of meta and game content. And unfortunately, she just appears to be a bit fish out of the water. Yes, you can use her to a reasonably good level in Act 6, in Labyrinth of Legends, and I'd assume Alliance Wars and so on and so forth, but she doesn't really shine. She didn't really take over, or she didn't kind of like skyrocket herself to top kind of contender, top champion in any of these areas. In Labyrinth of Legends, Aegon still absolutely humiliates her. In quests, we still have Ghost, who can outperform her so much when it comes to like damage and utility department. And the point is that she has a lot of hype because of her damage, but unfortunately, it's far from being the most practical kind of like version of a champion to use in current meta without current power level champions. Now, that being said, obviously we have Abyss coming in very near future, and that might change kind of her value in the community. At the same time, she does have a fair amount of utility available to her. She's a robot, so she's a bleed and poison immune character. She has a couple of ways how to access regen, either kind of like arc overloadish mechanic like Iron Man's have if you do not activate any pre-fight abilities, or via pre-fight ability on your medium hits. She has lifesteal. She also has some power control on level 1, and she has some power control on her pre-fight ability as well. And a unique bit is when she can turn on her critical hits, which is personally the reason why I kind of chose to rank her up, because we have long had spiked armor node, which was kind of alright to deal with because it was actual physical buff on opponent, and you could make a really good use of those with Mystic champions. It was something to nullify, something to deal extra damage with, something to get Mystic Dispersion with. But now we also gain Terminal Velocity node, which kind of like makes a fight really unbearable, and it can give opponents up to 300% power gain basically every time you land a critical hit. And being able just to shut off your critical hits and still have this amount of utility, have this amount of damage potential, definitely brings quite a bit of value to the champion in my eyes. And I'll be absolutely honest, so far I haven't gotten my money's worth out of her, just because there hasn't been a lot of new content coming in the game where I could actually go and fully use her. Additionally, she isn't really the top option for AQ or AW, so I hardly bring in there, and I haven't really played with her all that much. But at the same time, again, I can see the potential that this champion has, and she definitely can do quite a bit in 6.2 and 6.3, and there are obviously your inconveniences that you have to deal with, like never losing your combo, or finishing a fight with level 3 if you want to start the next fight with a 100 hit combo, so on and so forth. But at the same time, it is, I guess, a price we should be willing to pay for the potential damage and the utility. And yeah, so I will be honest, it's not one of my favorite champions to use. It's not a champion that has paid her catalysts back to me yet, so to speak, but I do hope that she will, and at the same time I can definitely see where she can be used if you do not have better alternatives in 6.2 and 6.3, and definitely Labyrinth of Legends as well. She's a solid kind of like top option, but Aegon leaves everybody in the dust over there. So she has spot number 4 for Tech Champions in December 2019. And with that, we will move on to spot number 3. And spot number 3, I'm going to give to Sentinel. Now, Sentinel is a champion I like. I like to hate or love to hate. I don't like the guy. It's simple as that. Initially, I probably wouldn't even have ranked him up if it wouldn't be for Alliance War defense, and he was a solid defender like back in the day, and he was like a real defensive tank, and he had decent prestige, and that is largely the reason why I ended up ranking him up after discussing with my Alliance officers what kind of we need, what we are lacking for the defense, and what would work out for my profile at the time as well, because I needed to increase prestige. But ever since that, he somehow manages to be useful. He does well in Variant 1, he does well in Variant 2, he absolutely wrecks Variant 3. Then he does well in Act 6.1, 2, and 3. And there always seem to be matchups or times popping up where this guy just absolutely wrecks the content, and unsuspectingly, he has earned my respect. Now, I will never say that I absolutely enjoy playing with him, because it is a bit tedious to do the rank up thing and get to the whole 100 analysis things and so on and so forth, and if you don't, then you don't hit too hard. But at the same time, the things he has done for me, for my account progression, and the kind of like the situations where you can continuously keep using this guy and find him useful, it's quite crazy to say the least, at least in my opinion. And for a champion that I had hardly any expectations from, to be honest, he has delivered and so much more than delivered, and this is the champion that I can definitely say has paid all of his debts back to me when it comes to using Catalyst, especially so early on, because he was one of my first 8 or 10 rank 5 champions. And yeah, man, he's been fantastic. I'm not in love with the guy when it comes to using him, but when it comes to the problems that he can solve, he's been pretty much like one of a kind. And for a really the longest time, I actually was super hesitant to drop him from the throne that I had placed him on myself as like the best robot in the game. But then obviously the Warlock joined the contest, and Warlock is one fairly impressive robot, to say the least. So he is an addition of 2019. He's one more new champion. So this list has been largely kind of taken over even by newer champions, because Mysterio, Guillotine 2099, and Warlock are all 2019 champions. And yeah, they're all in top 5. So Warlock, in my opinion, is second best deck champion in the game. But that's not kind of fault to Warlock. In many of the classes, he would skyrocket to the top position. It's just because the best champion in tech class is so far ahead the competition in pretty much most of the classes. Either way, so Warlock, he's a robot, plus he also has Cold Snap and immunity, so that's cool. Cold Snap and Frostbite, I believe, is all yes. And so he has immunity to bleed and poison. He has some cool synergies. He has also these infections, which serve as a passive heal block. So tech class is pretty much the home of your passive heal blocks, because we only have like 2 that are, best to my knowledge, actually, I think there are only 2 passive heal blocks in the game, and I think they're both here. There might be some more, but these 2 are definitely the ones that can utilize them the best, being Mysterio and Warlock. And yeah, with Warlock, basically you don't have to do anything. You just need to fight. You need to enter the fight, and you will have opponent heal blocked. Additionally, whenever they do try to heal, you do burn their power. And that being said, you have available power control on your level 1 and level 3, which is cool. Level 3 has tiny bit of heal. I'll be honest, I hardly ever use it as well. That power control in level 3, even though it does drain all of the power from opponent, it doesn't work as well as Omega Red does, because there is a slight delay in it. And if you push opponent to level 3 with your own level 3, then they still have time to launch it, and that is a big problem, and that is a quite big character design versus like opponents champions like Omega Red or Mephisto, so on and so forth. They drain that power immediately, and for whatever reason there seems to be a slight delay over the power burn or power drain that Warlock has on level 3. You can't really push opponents into level 3 territory and drop your level 3 and still be safe. They still have a chance to activate it, but that is a fairly noticeable flaw. I've definitely lost a couple of fights because of it, but all in all, he has definitely incredibly solid toolkit. He also has access to bleed, which is quite important on his heavy attacks, and it's a guaranteed access, and it's fairly decent sized bleed. There's also armor breaks and shock involved, and he has active armor buff all the time, and he's tanky, and he just deals with a lot of problem fights, whether that is Act 6, whether it's Variant, whether it's AQ, Omega Red mini bosses, or whether it's AW, all of the pesky mutants, Mr. Sinister, Sabretooth, so on and so forth. There are very few matchups that are really kind of like bad on paper for Warlock, and he is really kind of like solid, and also kind of in his simplicity. There is no extremely intricate way to play this guy. There's nothing kind of like you need to do this special attack, then land a heavy attack, then wait for a buff to come around. No, there's none of that. There's just kind of like, you take this champion, you hit the opponent, all of the abilities will activate, and you'll win the game kind of thing. So that is also definite plus for this champion. And yeah, I think he's a fantastic piece of design. Also visually, spectacularly, he's so phenomenally fun to play with. He's just goofy, he has interesting looks, he blocks with his face, he puts his face on end of a hammer that he used to hit the opponents, and it's just interesting. And whenever you use this guy, even though he's fairly basic champion to use, the animations make it seem really fun and interesting. And yeah, absolutely love this guy. Super happy to have him as a 6-star rank 2 duped, and he has put in a lot of work for me, and I'm excited to kind of potentially bring him to rank 3 in future if I ever get the chance. So yeah, Warlock in my opinion is second best champion in the tech class. And that being said, we're gonna move on to the best champion in tech class, and that is Ghost. And Ghost still, as ever, seemingly just kind of dominates the competition in Marvel Construct Champions. And if it wouldn't be for one different champion, which is a fairly controversial topic, I get it, then in my opinion Ghost would be so far ahead. But either way, we're here to talk about Ghost, nothing else. So the phasing ability lets her find openings where openings should not be found. So you can basically ignore stun immunity, you can ignore limber and shrug off effects, and you don't have to intercept, you can just phase, and that by itself is a huge deal when it comes to simply bypassing one of the base kind of like mechanics in the game, because you can always have an opening. And at the same point, the damage output, the guaranteed crits, now that are really kind of great. Obviously she can destroy opponents extremely quickly, put some tech power boosts on her, she's just gonna drop level 2 after level 2, and everything's going to drop down. Then obviously all of the utility with her being able to bypass evade, with her being able to deal with all types of damage over time effects that are debuffs, not passives, right? Because passives still kind of wreck her, unfortunately. And still, it kind of seems that Kabam design team are trying to design content that kind of slows Ghost down, and they are creating kind of counter champions. We have seen Ebony Maw enter the contest that she has a bad matchup against, but Ebony Maw sucks so much that nobody cares. You can beat Ebony Maw with the Wasp that you bring in for synergy. And then we have seen Mr. Sinister enter the contest, because that is also a direct kind of like counter to critical hits, and Havoc has a like huge critical damage resistance, or whatever else he has, and so on and so forth. So we have more and more of these champions that are quite clearly attempts to counter Ghost. Even like Man-Thing takes no extra damage from critical hits. Warlock, if he has active armor buff, doesn't kind of take damage there, or opponent cannot crit basically. And yeah, we have all of these new things coming and trying to stop Ghost, and nothing seems to work. That is how powerful she is. And I think that outside of flat out kind of like nerfing Ghost and having a character design change, I think that Ghost is going to be extremely dominant champion in the game for a really long time to come, mainly because all of the permanent content that's in there is already out there, and it's not going to get changed. And to blitz through Act 6.1, 2, and 3, and Variant 3 and 4 and 1, and so on and so forth, this champion will always be able to do it, and nothing's going to take it away from it. It's kind of like a Blade, like when we refer to Blade, that when Blade was alpha and omega of the game, when Act 5 was kind of like the final product, everything that was up until the point of Act 5 and below, Blade still absolutely destroys. And even in the future, if Kabam somehow figures out a way how to make Ghost kind of like phase out from the meta, at this point in the game, there is so much more content that she can absolutely destroy that, in my opinion, she will always, forever and ever, will be a worthwhile rank up for any up-and-coming summoner who's kind of like trying to force their way through all of that content. So yeah, Ghost is definitely a queen of tech class. Fantastic, phenomenal champion. Absolutely love playing with her. She does have a slight learning curve, but in my opinion, it isn't really as tricky to use Ghost as people kind of claim to be. And at the same point, with a little bit more training, if you learn to use Ghost without the Wasp and the Hood synergy, that opens up your questing team so much more. And yes, she's an absolute insane destroyer when she's fully kind of like synergized up, but if you learn to drop those level 2s and level 1s without the synergies, then you have champion that can destroy pretty much anything, and you have still 4 champion slots left free as well, which I do appreciate. For certain things, obviously, you will always need the Hood synergy, and Wasp just essentially makes it easier. It's not really a needed synergy. I don't want to say anything bad about Wasp, because I love the champion, but the synergy really isn't all that needed. And yeah, I believe that will pretty much do for today's video. So again, to recap, spot number 5 is Mysterio, spot number 4 is Guillotine 2099, spot number 3 is Sentinel, spot number 2 is Warlock, number 1 is Ghost. Now, a couple of champions definitely as worthy mentions. Stark Enhanced Spider-Man. Now, I know I'm gonna get a lot of stick for this. But in my opinion, this is a champion that simply has outlived his meta days. Now, obviously, he's not a bad champion. He can still do a lot. He delivers great amount of damage. But at the same time, don't see him in a Q match. You definitely don't see him in any high tier AW anymore. He hasn't really been all that useful or sustainable in Act 6, especially kind of 6.3, where those health pulls are so huge and the chip damage is massive. And whereas he still definitely has his uses, and I'm not going to hide the fact that I have never really been a huge fan of Stark Enhanced Spider-Man. I think that with the progression of the content that we have had, there's just not much space or need for the guy. But again, that being said, he's still definitely a great champion. In many people's opinions, he definitely would make a top champion list. Just unfortunately not in mine, because I have had plenty of reservations about this guy. And can definitely understand why people love him, what he does for them, but it just doesn't work as well as it used to in the newer content, in my opinion. And some other worthwhile mentions. Vision's still a fantastic champion, but with the huge health pulls and the lack of damage output, when it comes to kind of like more serious endgame content, he just doesn't seem to deliver. And the cheap damage you're gonna take by going through these fights and power controlling doesn't seem to be worth it anymore when you have options like Warlock, who can do kind of the same thing, or Ghost, who can just eat those level 3s, so on and so forth. So unfortunately, I think Vision is again another champion that's kind of like steeping a bit lower. That being said, he's still absolutely phenomenal power control option, but it's a bit kind of like too old school. It doesn't really seem to work in 6.2, 6.3, so on and so forth. And Darkhawk, I know many people absolutely love Darkhawk. I'm not one of them. And he definitely has his uses, but I think my top 5 potentially outperforms him. And Darkhawk is also a champion that absolutely has to be in SIG 200. And now one champion who was probably the closest making the top 5 list would have been Dr. Octopus, but in my opinion, he's just a bit too niche. He is definitely the best champion when it comes to dealing with improved power gain nodes. But other than that, I never see a need or feel a need for the guy, and just that's about it. He can be great under circumstances. I have no doubts about that. But the way I have encountered him and the way you speak about him and the way you see him being used is just really just the improved power gain stuff. And that will pretty much do it. These are obviously my opinions. You are welcome to have different ones. You're welcome to leave a comment with your own personal top 5. But that will do for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next class. See you guys.